biggest mistake that T.O. made, it was the same thing I thought that Canelo did. His biggest error, in my estimation, anyway, when he faced Mayweather, you don't try to beat a master at what the master's good at. When you look at Canelo and Maidana's not Canelo, but he fared better against Floyd because he stuck to what he knows. I think Tio Lopez went in there trying to box Shakur, and he's never going to be a better technical boxer than Shakur. He needed to apply more pressure, like me and a lot of other people said, yourself included. He needed to smother him more. He needed to make him uncomfortable, and I think he never did that. So as a result, he was basically in perfect distance to keep getting touch with that jab.
I like what you said with Medina and Mayweather because, in contrast, who would thought Zepeda would give Shakur a tougher fight than Tio would?
But Tio, exactly.
A master like Shakur Stevenson. I think Tio at times had in his mind that he wanted to do something different, but everything Shakur wanted to do off the jab worked, and that was a detriment to what anything Tio was trying to do. I would have liked to seen him try to make it rougher, but Shakur made him pay a toll every time he tried to come in. So he was kind of pissing in the wind with everything he was attempting to do. And everything Shakur said, you're kind of starting to see it. You know, him saying the tank fight wouldn't have been a problem. You know, he thought he could have beat Lomachenko a few years back. That's not far-fetched now that we're starting to see Shakur mature. He's starting to come into his frame a little bit more. And I don't think he necessarily, just watching last night, I don't think he needs this crazy power. Man, his jab is so damn good. It's just hard to overcome it because he throws it from so many different angles.
Yeah. The Lopez victory is now the well on his resume. It's the biggest name, biggest opponent, biggest threat, you might say. But it's Tio Lopez. He still doesn't, you could argue, again, playing devil's advocate, you could still argue he doesn't have the type of names on his resume you want him to have. Do you think him not taking some of those fights earlier in his career works against him overall, legacy-wise?
Well, I think he wanted them. I think for whatever reason, they just didn't come to fruition. So I think the Tio fight and the manner in which he won it, I don't think his legacy can be hurt. It's kind of like I look at Bud. Like, some people think Errol Spence's Bud's first real fight, but he won in such a dominant fashion. He could have retired that night and been first ballot Hall of Fame. I think Shakur kind of aligned himself in that company last night. He dominated. I had it, the first round I had it 10-10. I scored it even. I gave Teofimo the 8th round, and the rest was Shakur. So he dominated in such a manner that would we have liked to see those fights? Yes. And he did. From the outside looking in, it seems like he did everything on earth to make the tank fight happen. It just, for whatever reason, didn't. So, I think he has a lot of work still to do. He's 28 years old. I think he can still cement his legacy, but last night put him up there for me because the way I thought his corner, if you want to call it advice, was horrible. I thought his dad did a horrible job of relaying the message of what to do as opposed to do this, do that. But you got to tell him what to do and how to do it. And that was out the window. I think even his dad was kind of overwhelmed by the master that was Shakur Stevenson.
Yeah, I thought, and very well put there. I just think, and I don't want this to come out wrong to anyone. People always take this kind of stuff personal, but I'd rather be hated for being honest and loved for lying. Let's just call it for what it is. A lot of these fighters with their fathers in the corners, I understand, you have that bond. You started with them, you grew up shadow boxing in the house, whatever the hell. But this is a different level. And I just think a lot of times some of these fighters are kind of cutting themselves short by even continuing that at the highest level. Joe Calzaghe was able to get away with that. Floyd Mayweather was able to get away with that. But those are anomalies. Like, this is not something that everyone's going to be able to pull off. And we're starting to see it's more of a detriment to some of these fighters at the higher level than a benefit.
Well, and I'll give you one better than it being an anomaly. With the exception of Floyd Sr., I guess you could say, who's a little bit boisterous. When you have these overly animated fathers, it don't carry over well. There was times when T.O. was dancing on the stage at the weigh-in where the dad was stepping in front of him with the belts. You know, it's like they want to be seen. We saw it a little bit with Brian Norman Sr. I think Floyd Schofield's going through that with his dad. These boisterous, look at me type dads eventually at some point end up being a detriment to their kid's talent. T.O.'s a talented kid. He still needs that 60 seconds of advice when you send him back out there to the Lions den to execute the game plan, execute what you're telling him. But when you're not telling him anything, there's nothing to execute. When you're not telling him to switch it up, which looking at it, I don't think they had a plan B. So maybe it was nothing to go to. Maybe it was nothing to fall back on. But I think a lot of times, man, I mean, you're with your dad from start. So, if you started boxing at 6, 7 years old, sometimes your father teaches you all they know. And that's as far as they can go. Bring in another set of eyes. I'm not saying fire him completely, but he's worked with, I've seen him in the gym with Freddie Roach and guys like that. Maybe it's time to bring somebody else in.
Yeah, I just think T.O. has too much talent to be in a situation like that where he almost looked dumbfounded, where there was no true plan B. They knew who they were facing. So we got the very best that tandem could produce, and it was nowhere near enough. I just think he needed more sound advice. What do you see ahead for T.O.?
Like I said earlier, man, I like to see T.O. go back down to 135. I don't know how tough it is for him to make 140. He just looks small, like super small. So I would like to see him go back to 35. We don't know what Tank's future is in or out of the ring. So I would still be interested in a T.O. Tank fight. I think you can market that. Two very vocal corners, two very T.O.'s a little more eccentric than Tank, but Tank get his little punchlines in there. So I think that would be an easy fight to sell. The 35 landscape is thinning out because you got a lot of guys moving north of that, 40 and 47. Yeah. But I think T.O. may want to consider 35. Hell, even maybe do the Kambosos rematch that he never got. Something like that. For Shakur, I know he's talking going back to 35. I don't know if that's not avoid, but I know him and Keyshawn Davis say they don't want to fight each other. Keyshawn say he'll go up to 47. I would like to see Shakur stay at 40. The money fight seems to be kind of Ben because he does bring a British crowd. Although I did see T.O. say something. I did see Shakur say something about a rehydration clause if he was to fight Conor. So I don't know how realistic that is. But I think he beats Conor Ben fairly easy. That's the money grab fight. If he stays at 40, not a whole lot of movement. Richardson Hitchens is there. That's a fight that can possibly draw some attention. Gary Antoine Russell.
That's actually a pretty good fight.
But he's a dangerous fighter. There's fights there, but I think he looks so good in 140, man. I would hate to see him go back down. I don't know what he would do to his body going back to 35. So leave well enough alone, bro. Stay where you at.